The rain came down like nails driven by God's own hammer, and Theresa Turner stood shivering on the porch of her family's ranch house, while her stepmother's voice shrieked through the locked door that she would sleep with the animals if she could not learn proper gratitude. Theresa pressed her palms against the rough wood, her cotton dress already soaked through to her chemise, her dark hair plastered to her face and neck. She was 22 years old and had survived her father's death 6 months prior, but she had not survived the arrival of Charlotte Turner, the woman her father had married in his final year when grief over Theresa's mother had finally broken him. Charlotte had 3 sons of her own, grown men who looked at Theresa like she was something they could divide among themselves, and a daughter who delighted in watching Theresa suffer. "Please," Theresa called through the door, but the only answer was her stepsister's laughter. The storm had rolled in from the west that April evening in 1882, turning the Arizona sky black as pitch. Winslow was a railroad town, new and raw, where the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad had brought civilization and chaos in equal measure. The Turner Ranch sat 3 miles outside town, close enough to sell beef to the railroad workers, but far enough that no one would hear Theresa's cries for help. She had made the mistake of refusing her stepbrother's advances at supper. Martin Turner had put his hand on her knee beneath the table, and she had dumped her coffee in his lap. Charlotte had flown into a rage, calling Theresa ungrateful and wicked, saying she had tempted Martin with her shameless ways. The accusations were so absurd that Theresa had laughed, which only made things worse. Charlotte had ordered her sons to throw Theresa out, and they had done so with enthusiasm, bolting the door behind her. Now lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled across the desert like cannon fire. Theresa knew she could not stay on the porch. The wind was rising, carrying the rain sideways, and she was already shaking with cold despite the relative warmth of the spring night. She stepped off the porch and started walking, her boots squelching in the mud, her only thought to reach the barn where at least she might find shelter among the horses. But the barn was locked too. Martin had thought of that. Theresa stood in the downpour, water running into her eyes, and made a decision. The Dawson place was 2 miles east, across open range. She had seen the cowboy who lived there a few times in town, a tall man with sun-weathered skin and careful eyes who always tipped his hat to her. He kept to himself mostly, running a small horse ranch that everyone said produced the finest cutting horses in northern Arizona. She did not know him, but she knew he was decent, and decency was all she had to hope for now. She started walking. The mud sucked at her boots with every step. The rain came harder, driven by wind that tore at her dress and hair. Lightning illuminated the landscape in brief, brilliant flashes, showing her the rolling desert hills dotted with juniper and sage. She kept her head down and walked, counting her steps because it gave her something to focus on besides the cold and the fear. 100 steps, 200, 500. She fell twice, sprawling in the mud, and each time she forced herself to stand and keep moving. Her hands were numb. Her feet were numb. She could not feel her face anymore, could not tell if she was crying or if it was just the rain. The world had become nothing but darkness and water, and the endless act of putting one foot in front of the other. When she finally saw the light, she thought at first that she was imagining it. A warm yellow glow in the distance, steady and real. She stumbled toward it, half blind now, her breath coming in gasps. The light grew brighter, resolved into the windows of a small ranch house with a wide porch and smoke rising from the chimney despite the rain. Theresa climbed the porch steps, grabbed the post to steady herself, and knocked on the door. Her knuckles barely made a sound. She tried again, harder, and heard movement inside. Footsteps. The door opened. The man who stood there was perhaps 30 years old, tall and lean, with dark hair and darker eyes that widened when they saw her. He wore a work shirt with the sleeves rolled up and denim trousers, and for a moment he simply stared as if he could not believe what he was seeing. "Help me," Theresa whispered, and then her legs gave out. He caught her before she hit the floor, his arms strong and sure, and lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing. She felt him carry her inside, felt the blessed warmth of the house, heard the door close behind them. He set her down on something soft, a sofa or a bed, and she opened her eyes to see him looking down at her with concern written across every line of his face. "What happened to you?" His voice was low and rough, like stones tumbling in a river. "My family," she managed through chattering teeth. "They locked me out." His expression went very still, and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Then he moved into action, disappearing and returning with an armload of blankets and a towel. "You need to get out of those wet clothes or you will catch pneumonia." "Can you manage on your own, or do you need help?" Theresa tried to sit up and failed. Her fingers would not obey her, would not grip the fabric of her dress. She looked at him helplessly. "All right," he said quietly. "I am going to help you, and I give you my word as a gentleman that I will not take any liberties. Do you understand?" She nodded. He worked with quick efficiency, his touch completely impersonal despite the intimacy of what he was doing. He unbuttoned her dress and peeled it away, removed her soaked petticoat and chemise, and wrapped her in a thick wool blanket before she could feel exposed. He dried her hair with the towel, rubbing briskly until some warmth began to return to her scalp. Then he piled more blankets on top of her and disappeared again, returning with a cup of something hot that steamed in the lamplight. "Coffee with whiskey," he said, helping her sit up enough to drink. "It will warm you from the inside." The liquid burned going down, but it was a good burn, and she felt heat beginning to spread through her chest and stomach. She drank it all, and he took the cup away and settled her back against the pillows. "I am Killian Dawson," he said. "This is my home, and you are safe here. No one will hurt you while I draw breath." "Theresa Turner," she whispered. "Thank you. Do not thank me for basic human decency. Now rest. We will talk in the morning when you are stronger." She wanted to stay awake, wanted to explain everything, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Her eyes closed, and she sank into darkness with the feeling of safety wrapped around her like one of Killian's blankets. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and she could hear someone moving around in another room. She sat up slowly, her muscles sore and protesting, and looked around. She was on a sofa in a small but well-kept parlor. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and her dress hung on a drying rack nearby, clean and pressed. Someone had left a set of clothes folded on a chair near the sofa. A man's shirt and trousers, too large for her but better than nothing. She dressed quickly, rolling up the sleeves and cuffs, and followed the sound of movement to the kitchen. Killian stood at the stove, frying eggs and bacon, his back to her. Morning light made his dark hair shine, and she noticed for the first time how broad his shoulders were, how competently he moved. "Sit down," he said without turning around. "Breakfast is almost ready." She sat at the small wooden table and watched him work. He moved with the same efficiency he had shown the night before, no wasted motion, everything done with quiet skill. He brought her a plate heaped with food and a cup of coffee, then sat across from her with his own plate. "Eat," he said. "Then tell me what happened." The food was good, simple but cooked perfectly, and Theresa realized she was starving. She ate half the plate before she spoke, and Killian waited patiently, his coffee cup cradled in both hands. "My father died 6 months ago," she began. He had remarried the year before, and his new wife has her own children. After he passed, Charlotte, my stepmother, made it clear that I was no longer welcome. She wants the ranch for her sons. Last night I refused my stepbrother's unwanted attention, and she had me thrown out into the storm. Killian's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. Do you have anywhere else to go? Family? Friends? No, my mother's family is in Pennsylvania. I have not seen them since I was a child, and I have no money for train fare even if I wanted to go back east. What about your father's will? He left everything to Charlotte. He wrote the will after they married when he was already sick. I think he believed she would take care of me. Theresa's voice went bitter. He was wrong. Killian was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face. Then he said, "You can stay here." What? You can stay here at least until we figure out a better solution. I have a spare room. You will have privacy and safety. I give you my word that I will behave as a gentleman at all times. I cannot impose on you like that. You do not even know me. I know that you were thrown out into a storm that could have killed you. I know that your family has treated you in a manner that no decent person would treat a dog. That is enough. He paused, then added, I should tell you that I live alone here. There is no wife, no housekeeper, no one to act as chaperone. If you stay, there will be talk. There will be talk no matter what I do, Theresa said quietly. At least here I will be warm and safe. He nodded as if that settled it. Then it is decided. The spare room is small, but it has a good bed and a window that gets morning sun. I will show you after breakfast. They ate in companionable silence, and then Killian gave her a tour of the house. It was not large, just 4 rooms and a kitchen, but everything was clean and well maintained. The spare room held a narrow bed, a dresser, and a chair by the window. It was more than Theresa had dared to hope for. I need to work with the horses today, Killian said. You are welcome to rest or to explore or to do whatever you like. Consider this your home for as long as you need it. I cannot just sit idle while you work. Let me help. I grew up on a ranch. I know my way around horses and cattle. He looked surprised, then pleased. If you are sure, I could use an extra pair of hands. They spent the day in the corrals and barn, working with the young horses Killian was training. Theresa watched him gentle, a flighty 2-year-old colt with patience and skill, never raising his voice, never using force, just quiet persistence until the horse learned to trust him. It was beautiful to watch, and she found herself fascinated by the way he moved, the way he seemed to understand what the animals were thinking. He let her work with some of the gentler horses, and she proved herself capable, earning a rare smile from him when she successfully got a stubborn mare to accept a saddle pad. They worked together easily, falling into a rhythm as if they had been doing this for years instead of hours. That evening, Killian cooked dinner while Theresa set the table and washed vegetables from his garden. It felt strangely domestic, strangely comfortable. She had expected awkwardness, had expected to feel like an intruder, but instead she felt more at home than she had in months. You are a good cook, she said as they ate the beef stew he had made. I have had a lot of practice. I have been on my own since I was 17. You learn to cook or you starve. What brought you to Arizona? Work. I grew up in Texas, worked on ranches there until I had saved enough to buy my own place. I heard the railroad was coming through here, knew there would be a need for good horses. So I came west and bought this land. He paused. It has been a good life, quiet but good. Do you not get lonely? He looked at her and something passed between them, something she could not quite name. Sometimes, he admitted, but loneliness is better than bad company. She understood that sentiment all too well. The days turned into a week, and the week turned into 2. Theresa settled into life on the Dawson ranch, and it was like putting on a pair of well-worn boots that fit perfectly. She woke with the sun, helped Killian with the horses, learned to cook the simple meals he preferred, and fell into bed each night exhausted but content. They talked during meals and in the evenings, long conversations about everything and nothing. She learned that he loved to read, that his small bookshelf held poetry and philosophy alongside practical manuals on horse training. He learned that she could play the guitar, and he produced one from somewhere, an old instrument that had belonged to his father, and asked her to play. She played songs her mother had taught her, old ballads and folk tunes, and Killian listened with his eyes closed, a small smile on his face. When she finished, he thanked her quietly and said it was the most beautiful thing he had heard in years. Something was growing between them, slow and steady like a plant putting down roots. Theresa felt it every time their hands accidentally touched, every time she caught him watching her with those dark, thoughtful eyes. She felt it in the way he always made sure she had the best portions at meals, the way he had fixed the squeaky hinge on her bedroom door without being asked, the way he said her name like it was something precious. She was falling in love with him, and the realization terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. One evening, about 3 weeks after she had arrived, Killian asked if she would ride into town with him. "I need to pick up supplies, and I thought you might like to get out for a bit. We can stop at the general store, maybe have lunch at the hotel." Theresa agreed, eager for a change of scenery, and they hitched up the wagon early the next morning. The ride into Winslow took about an hour, and they talked easily the whole way, pointing out landmarks, discussing the weather, planning what they needed to buy. But when they reached town, Theresa's good mood evaporated. Standing outside the general store was her stepbrother Martin, and his eyes lit up with malicious glee when he saw her. "Well, well," he called out, "if it is not my dear sister. We have been worried sick about you, Theresa. Mother thought you might have died in that storm." Killian's hand moved to her elbow, steadying her. "Miss Turner is perfectly well, as you can see." Martin's gaze shifted to Killian, and his expression grew ugly. "Is she now? And where exactly has she been staying? Not at the hotel, I am sure. You cannot afford that, can you, Theresa?" "That is none of your concern," Killian said, his voice gone cold and hard. "Oh, but it is my concern. She is my sister, after all, and if she has been living in sin with some cowboy, then that concerns the whole family." Martin stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You should come home, Theresa. Mother is willing to forgive you if you apologize." "Apologize for what?" "For defending myself against you, for your ungrateful behavior, for running off and shaming the family, for spreading your legs for the first man who would take you in." Killian moved so fast that Theresa barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside her, the next he had Martin by the shirt front, slammed against the wall of the general store. "You will apologize to the lady," he said quietly, "or I will break your jaw." A crowd was gathering, townspeople stopping to watch the confrontation. Theresa saw the sheriff pushing through, a heavy-set man with a badge pinned to his vest. "That is enough," the sheriff said. "Let him go, Dawson." Killian released Martin but did not step back. "This man insulted Miss Turner's honor. I was defending her." "That is not what I heard," Martin said, straightening his shirt. "I heard him threaten me for no reason. I was just trying to talk to my sister." The sheriff looked between them, his expression weary. "Dawson, why do not you and Miss Turner come to my office? We will sort this out properly." They sat in the sheriff's cramped office while Martin made his case. He claimed that Theresa had run away from home after an argument, that the family had been searching for her, that they were worried about her living arrangements. He suggested, with false concern, that perhaps Killian had taken advantage of a vulnerable young woman. Theresa listened with growing anger, and when Martin finally stopped talking, she spoke up. That is a lie. My stepmother had me thrown out into the storm. I nearly died. If Mr. Dawson had not taken me in, I would have frozen to death or been struck by lightning. He has been nothing but a perfect gentleman, the sheriff sighed. Miss Turner, I understand there are family difficulties here, but you have to understand how this looks. An unmarried woman living with an unmarried man. People will talk. Let them talk. It is not that simple. Your stepmother could make trouble, claim that Dawson compromised you. She could take him to court. Killian spoke for the first time since they had sat down. Then I will marry her. The room went silent. Theresa turned to stare at him, her heart pounding. What? She whispered. He looked at her, his expression serious and steady. I will marry you if you will have me. It will put an end to the gossip and the threats. You will be my wife with all the protection that brings. You cannot marry someone just to stop gossip. I am not. He reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. Theresa, these past weeks have been the happiest of my life. I had not realized how lonely I was until you came. I know this is sudden, and I know I should court you properly, give you time and flowers and pretty words. But I do not want to lose you to these people who have treated you so poorly. Marry me, not because you have to, but because you want to. Theresa looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. He was not offering out of pity or obligation. He cared for her, truly cared, and she realized that she had been blind not to see it before. All the small kindnesses, the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching, the way he always made sure she was comfortable and safe. Yes, she said, I will marry you. Martin exploded out of his chair. This is ridiculous. You cannot just decide to get married to avoid scandal. Actually, they can, the sheriff said. He was smiling now, clearly pleased with this solution. Judge Henderson is in town. He can perform the ceremony this afternoon if you are both willing. We are willing, Killian said firmly. They were married 3 hours later in the judge's parlor, with the sheriff and his wife standing as witnesses. Theresa wore a simple dress borrowed from the sheriff's wife, and Killian wore his best shirt and vest. The ceremony was brief, just the standard vows, but when Killian slipped a plain gold band onto her finger and kissed her, Theresa felt like her heart might burst from her chest. They were married. She was his wife. He was her husband. The realization hit her as they walked out into the afternoon sunshine, and she started to laugh, giddy with relief and joy and disbelief. Killian laughed too, and then he picked her up and spun her around, right there in the middle of the street, not caring who saw. They bought supplies and loaded the wagon, and word spread through town faster than fire through dry grass. By the time they were ready to leave, half of Winslow knew that Killian Dawson had married Theresa Turner. People congratulated them, shook Killian's hand, smiled at Theresa. She caught sight of Martin watching from across the street, his face twisted with anger, but she did not care. He could not touch her now. She was free. The ride back to the ranch seemed shorter than the ride out, and they talked the whole way, making plans, discussing the future. Killian wanted to expand the horse operation, maybe breed cattle too. Theresa suggested growing more vegetables, perhaps selling produce to the railroad. They would work together, build something good and lasting. When they reached the ranch, Killian helped her down from the wagon, and then he just stood there holding her, looking down at her with an expression so tender that it made her chest ache. I know this happened fast, he said, and I know we have not talked about everything that marriage means. I do not expect anything from you tonight or any night until you are ready. I meant what I said about being a gentleman. Theresa reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble under her palm. Killian, I am ready. I want to be your wife in every way. Something blazed in his eyes, hot and fierce. Are you certain? I am certain. He kissed her then, truly kissed her, not the brief press of lips from the ceremony but a deep, claiming kiss that made her knees go weak. She kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, all the gratitude and affection and growing love. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I will do my best to make you happy," he said. "I swear it. You already have." They moved the supplies later after dark, when the urgency of their desire had been satisfied, and they lay tangled together in Killian's bed, in what was now their bed. Theresa had not known it could be like that, so tender and passionate at once. Killian had been patient and careful, making sure she was comfortable, making sure she felt safe. And when they came together, it had been perfect, like two pieces of a puzzle finally fitting into place. Now she lay with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, and felt more content than she had ever felt in her life. "Tell me something about yourself that I do not know," she murmured. He thought for a moment, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I am afraid of deep water. I nearly drowned in a river when I was 8, and I have not been comfortable around water since." "I am afraid of the dark," Theresa admitted. "Not just being in the dark, but the idea that something terrible could happen and no one would see. That is why being locked out in the storm was so frightening." "You are safe now," he said, pulling her closer. "I will not let anything happen to you." She believed him. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. They worked the ranch together during the day, building the business and improving the property. Killian taught Theresa everything he knew about training horses, and she proved to have a gift for it, a gentle touch and endless patience that the animals responded to. They became partners in every sense of the word, making decisions together, supporting each other, building a life. Word got back to them that Charlotte Turner was furious about the marriage, but there was nothing she could do. Theresa was legally married, and she had no claim to the Dawson ranch. Martin tried to spread rumors about the speed of the marriage, suggesting impropriety, but no one cared. Theresa was well liked in town, and Killian had a solid reputation. People were happy for them. Summer came to northern Arizona, bringing heat that shimmered on the horizon and turned the sky a hard, brilliant blue. Theresa learned to love the desert, the way the land changed color with the angle of the sun, the way storms could be seen coming from miles away. She learned which plants were useful, which were poisonous, how to read the signs that told when rain was coming or when the well was running low. She also learned what it meant to be married to a man she was falling more in love with every day. Killian was not demonstrative in public, but in private he was affectionate and attentive, always making sure she knew how much he cared. He brought her wildflowers that grew in the high desert. He built her a better kitchen garden with raised beds and a fence to keep out the rabbits. He taught her to shoot, patiently correcting her stance until she could hit a target at 50 yards. In return, she made the house a home. She sewed curtains for the windows and a quilt for their bed. She cooked meals that made him close his eyes in pleasure. She sang and played guitar in the evenings, filling the house with music. She loved him with everything she had, and she could see that he loved her just as fiercely. By August, she suspected she might be pregnant. She waited another few weeks to be sure, and then she told him one evening after supper, her heart racing with nervousness and excitement. "I think I am expecting a baby." Killian went very still, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Then he set the cup down carefully and looked at her, and the joy on his face was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Truly, truly. I am about 3 months along, I think." He came around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. When he finally let go, his eyes were wet, and Theresa realized she was crying too. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. We are going to be parents. Are you happy? Happy. Theresa, I am beyond happy. I am blessed. We are blessed. They celebrated that night, making love with extra gentleness. And afterward, Killian kept his hand on her still flat stomach as if he could feel the tiny life growing there. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Theresa felt well, just a little tired in the afternoons, and she continued to work with the horses through her 5th month until Killian finally put his foot down and insisted she rest more. She grumbled about it, but secretly she was grateful. She was getting bigger, her balance shifting, and she did not want to risk a fall. They prepared the spare room as a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and building a cradle from pine wood. Theresa sewed tiny clothes, marveling at how small they were, how perfect. She could not wait to meet this baby, this child that she and Killian had created together. In late February of 1883, on a cold, clear night when the stars seemed close enough to touch, Theresa went into labor. Killian rode to town to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Patterson, who had delivered half the babies in Winslow. She examined Theresa, pronounced everything normal, and settled in to wait. The labor lasted 14 hours, and Killian stayed with Theresa the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, talking to her when she needed distraction. Mrs. Patterson did not approve of husbands being present, but Killian refused to leave, and Theresa was grateful for his presence. When the baby finally came, announcing his arrival with a lusty cry, Mrs. Patterson placed him on Theresa's chest and said, "You have a son, a big, healthy boy." Theresa looked down at the tiny, red-faced creature, and her heart simply melted. He was perfect, absolutely perfect, with a cap of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn brown like his father's. She traced his little hand with her finger, amazed when his fingers curled around hers. Killian leaned over them both, his face full of wonder and love. "He is beautiful," he whispered. "You are both beautiful." "What should we name him?" Theresa asked. They had discussed names but had not decided on anything. Now Killian said, "What about James, after your father?" Theresa felt tears spring to her eyes. Her father had made mistakes, but he had loved her once before grief had broken him. "James Dawson, I like that." They named their son James, and he was christened at the church in Winslow 6 weeks later. The whole town came out for the celebration, and Theresa felt overwhelmed by the warmth and support of their community. These were her people now, her home. She healed well from the birth, and soon she was back to working around the ranch, though she was careful not to overdo it. James was an easy baby, content to sleep in his cradle while they worked nearby, and Theresa often carried him in a sling against her chest as she went about her chores. Killian was a devoted father, taking his turn walking the floor when James was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, making silly faces to earn the baby's first smiles. Watching him with their son, Theresa fell in love with him all over again. The ranch prospered. Killian's horses gained a reputation across Arizona territory, and they could barely keep up with the demand. They hired a young man named Tom to help with the work, and then another man, and soon they had a proper operation. Theresa kept the books and managed the business side, proving to have a head for numbers and negotiation. Together, they built something successful and sustainable. When James was 18 months old, Theresa discovered she was pregnant again. This time she knew the signs immediately, and she told Killian that night while they were getting ready for bed. "Another one," he said, grinning. "Are you trying to give me a whole herd of children? Would that be so terrible, terrible? No, it would be wonderful." He kissed her, then knelt and kissed her belly. "Hello in there, little one. We cannot wait to meet you." This pregnancy was harder than the first. Theresa was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep food down, and she felt more tired than she had with James. But the midwife assured her that every pregnancy was different, that this was all normal, and gradually the sickness passed, and she felt better. Their daughter was born in October of 1884, a smaller baby than James had been, with fine blonde hair and blue eyes. They named her Emma, and she had her father's serious expression from the very beginning. Killian was completely smitten, carrying her around the house for hours, singing to her in his rough voice. "You are such a soft touch," Theresa teased, watching him rock Emma to sleep. "Only with my girls," he said, smiling at her. "You have me completely under your control." Life was full and busy with 2 small children and a growing business. Some days Theresa fell into bed exhausted, barely able to keep her eyes open. But even on the hardest days, she was happy. She had a husband who loved her, children who filled her heart to bursting, work that gave her purpose, and a home that was truly hers. She sometimes thought about that night in the storm, about how close she had come to dying, and marveled at how much her life had changed. If Killian had not opened his door, if he had turned her away, she would not have any of this. She would not have this beautiful, messy, perfect life. One evening when Emma was about 6 months old, there was a knock at the door. Killian answered it, and Theresa heard voices, one of them unfamiliar. She came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, and stopped short when she saw who it was. Charlotte Turner stood on their porch, looking older and more haggard than Theresa remembered. Her dress was shabby, and there were lines of bitterness carved deep around her mouth. "What do you want?" Theresa asked, her voice cold. "I need to speak with you," Charlotte said. "May I come in?" Theresa wanted to refuse, wanted to slam the door in her stepmother's face the way Charlotte had slammed the door in hers. But Killian touched her elbow gently, and she sighed and stepped back to let the woman in. They sat in the parlor, and Charlotte looked around at the comfortable house, the signs of prosperity and happiness, with barely concealed envy. "Finally," she said, "the ranch is failing. Martin ran up debts gambling, and we cannot pay them. The bank is going to foreclose. And you want money from me," Theresa said flatly. "I want you to remember that I am family, that your father would want you to help." Anger flared hot in Theresa's chest. "My father is dead, and you made it clear that I was not family when you threw me out to die in a storm. You have no right to ask me for anything." "Please," Charlotte said, and for the first time she sounded genuinely desperate. "I have nowhere else to turn. Martin and his brothers have left. My daughter is married and will not help me. I will lose everything." Theresa looked at the woman who had made her life miserable, who had allowed her sons to threaten and harass her, who had locked her out on the worst night of her life. She felt no pity, only a cold satisfaction that justice had finally caught up with Charlotte Turner. But then she thought of her father, of the good man he had been before grief had twisted him. She thought of what he would have wanted. "I will give you enough money for a train ticket east," she said. "You can go to your family, start over somewhere else. But that is all I will do. I will not pay Martin's debts, and I will not save the ranch. Do you understand?" Charlotte's face crumpled. "That is all you will give me. After everything, you should be grateful I am giving you that much. Take it or leave it, but make your choice now and then get out of my house." Charlotte took the money, and Theresa never saw her again. She heard later that the woman had indeed gone back east, had moved in with relatives in Ohio. The Turner ranch was sold at auction, and good riddance to it. Theresa felt no sorrow at its loss, only relief that the door was finally closed on that chapter of her life. The years passed, full and sweet. James grew into a bright, curious boy who loved horses as much as his father did. Emma was quieter but just as determined, with a stubborn streak that made Theresa laugh. They had another child, a second son named Daniel, born in 1887 when Theresa was 27. The house was full of noise and laughter, and the controlled chaos of raising 3 children while running a business. Killian built them a larger house, one with enough bedrooms for everyone, and a big kitchen where Theresa could cook and bake to her heart's content. They planted shade trees around it and put in a proper flower garden. It became the kind of home that people visited and left feeling warmer for having been there. The ranch continued to prosper. They bred cattle now as well as horses, and they bought more land, expanding their holdings until they had one of the most successful operations in northern Arizona. But success did not change them. They still worked alongside their hired men, still got their hands dirty, still remembered what it was like to struggle. Theresa became involved in the community, helping to establish a school in Winslow and serving on the church committee. She made friends, real friends, women who valued her for who she was and not for what she could give them. She taught Sunday school and organized charity drives and became known as someone who could be counted on to help when help was needed. Killian became a respected figure in the territory, known for his integrity and fairness. He was asked to serve as a mediator in disputes, and people sought his counsel on everything from horse breeding to business investments. But he never let it go to his head, remained the same quiet, thoughtful man he had always been. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Killian surprised Theresa with a trip. He arranged for the children to stay with friends, and he took her to California, to the ocean she had never seen. They stayed in a hotel in San Diego and walked on the beach, and Theresa laughed with delight when she saw the endless blue water, the waves crashing on the sand. "It is so big," she marveled. "I never imagined anything could be so big." Killian smiled, watching her more than he watched the ocean. "I wanted to show you something beautiful. You show me beautiful things every day." He took her hand and pulled her close, right there on the beach with other people around. "Theresa, these 10 years with you have been the best years of my life. You are my partner, my love, my heart. I thank God every day that you knocked on my door. I thank God every day that you opened it." They kissed, tasting salt spray on each other's lips, and Theresa thought that this was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of struggle or pain, but the presence of love so strong that it could weather any storm. They went home to Arizona, to their children and their ranch and their life, and the years continued to unfold. James turned 16 and began working the ranch full-time, showing a gift for managing the business side that impressed even Theresa. Emma at 13 was horse-mad, spending every spare moment in the corrals, and Killian said she would be a better trainer than him someday. Daniel at 8 was the scholar of the family, always with his nose in a book, dreaming of becoming a lawyer or a doctor. Theresa was proud of all of them, these children she and Killian had raised together. They were good kids, respectful and hardworking, and she knew they would make their way in the world just fine. More years passed. Arizona became a state in 1912, and there was a big celebration in Winslow. By then, Theresa and Killian were in their 50s, their hair going gray, their hands marked with the calluses of a lifetime of work. But they were still healthy, still active, still deeply in love. James married a school teacher named Alice and gave them their first grandchild, a little girl they named Theresa. Emma married a rancher from Flagstaff and moved north, though she visited often. Daniel went to college in California, studying law just as he had always wanted. The house that had been so full for so long was quiet now with just the two of them. Theresa sometimes missed the chaos of raising children, but she also enjoyed the peace, the chance to focus on just her and Killian again. They still worked the ranch, though they had a good foreman now who handled most of the day-to-day operations. They spent more time on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the desert, holding hands like they had when they were young. "You ever regret it?" Killian asked one evening. "Marrying me so quickly, without really knowing what you were getting into." Theresa looked at him, at this man who had saved her life in more ways than one, who had given her a home and a family, and a love she had not even known to dream of. "Not for a single moment," she said. "You? Never. Not once. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one, and Theresa thought back to that terrified girl standing in the storm, pounding on a stranger's door. She had been so afraid, so desperate, so certain that her life was over. But her life had not been over. It had been beginning. Killian had opened his door that night, and he had never closed it. He had let her into his home and his life and his heart, and he had never asked her to leave. He had made her his wife, his partner, the mother of his children. He had loved her through good times and hard times, through the everyday struggles and the moments of joy, and she had loved him just as fiercely, just as completely. She still did. She always would. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too," he replied, squeezing her hand. "Always have, always will." They sat together as the night deepened around them, two people who had found each other by chance and stayed together by choice, two lives woven so tightly together that they could no longer be separated. It was a good life, Theresa thought. A very good life indeed. The years continued their steady march, bringing new grandchildren and new joys. James and Alice had two more children, boys this time, rambunctious and loud and adored. Emma had a son who was quiet and thoughtful like his Uncle Daniel. Daniel himself married a woman he met at college, a suffragette named Helen who had strong opinions about everything and whom Theresa liked immediately. The ranch passed primarily to James, who had always been most interested in running it, though Killian made sure all three children received equal inheritances. James proved to be an excellent rancher, taking the operation to new heights while maintaining the integrity and values his parents had instilled in him. By 1920, when Theresa was 60 years old and Killian was 68, they had 7 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild on the way. Their family gatherings were loud, chaotic affairs that left them exhausted but happy. Killian's health began to fail that year. Nothing dramatic, just a gradual slowing, a persistent tiredness that never quite went away. The doctor said his heart was wearing out, that there was nothing to be done but rest and take things easy. Killian grumbled about being treated like an invalid, but he followed orders because Theresa insisted. They spent more time together in those last years, talking about everything and nothing, reminiscing about the life they had built together. Killian told stories about the early days of the ranch, about breaking horses and battling droughts and the pride he had felt watching their children grow. Theresa told him about how frightened she had been that first night, about how she had known the moment she looked into his eyes that she was safe. "I knew right then that you were someone special," she said. "I just did not know yet that you would be everything." He smiled, the same gentle smile she had fallen in love with all those years ago. "You have made my life worth living, Theresa. Every single day with you has been a gift." Killian died in his sleep on a spring morning in 1922, with Theresa lying beside him. She woke to find him gone, and even though she had known it was coming, even though they had said their goodbyes 100 times over, the pain of losing him was almost more than she could bear. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a cottonwood tree he had planted himself 40 years earlier. The whole town came to the funeral, along with ranchers from all over Arizona, all of them wanting to pay their respects to a man who had lived with honor and integrity. Theresa stood at the graveside with her children around her, and she did not cry. She had done her crying in private in the nights after he died, when the bed felt too big and too empty. Now she stood strong, remembering not the loss but the love, not the ending but the incredible gift of all those years together. After the funeral, James tried to convince her to move into town, to live with him and Alice where she would not be alone. But Theresa refused. This ranch was her home, bought with Killian's dreams and built with their shared labor. She would not leave it. She lived another 15 years, active and engaged until the very end. She taught her grandchildren to play guitar and ride horses. She told them stories about their grandfather, making sure they knew what kind of man he had been. She kept the ranch books until James finally insisted on hiring an accountant, and even then she checked their work. She watched Arizona change and grow, saw automobiles replace horses on the roads, saw Winslow expand from a rough railroad town into a proper city. She voted in elections after women got the suffrage, a right Helen had fought hard for. She saw her great-grandchildren born, held them in her arms, and marveled at how the circle of life continued. But as much as she loved her family and her life, part of her was always waiting to be reunited with Killian. She felt his absence like a missing limb, an ache that never quite went away. She talked to him sometimes, sitting on the porch in the evenings, telling him about the children and the grandchildren, about the rain or the heat or the price of cattle. She liked to think he could hear her, that somehow he was still watching over them all. Theresa died peacefully in her sleep in 1937, at the age of 77. She had lived a long, full life, rich with love and purpose and meaning. Her children found her in her bed with a small smile on her face, as if she had seen something wonderful in those final moments. They buried her next to Killian under the cottonwood tree, and the whole family gathered to say goodbye. Emma gave the eulogy, talking about her mother's strength and grace, about how she had overcome hardship to build something beautiful, about the love that had sustained her through more than 5 decades of marriage. "My mother taught us that family is not about blood," Emma said, her voice steady despite her tears. "It is about love and loyalty and standing by each other no matter what. She taught us to work hard, to treat people fairly, to never give up even when things seem impossible. But most of all, she taught us what true love looks like. She and my father had something rare and precious, and they never took it for granted. They chose each other every single day, and that choice created a legacy that will live on in all of us." The family stayed at the ranch for a week after the funeral, going through Theresa's things, sharing memories, supporting each other in their grief. They found letters Killian had written to Theresa over the years, love notes tucked into books and drawers, each one a small declaration of affection. They found Theresa's journals, decades of entries detailing the daily life of the ranch, the growth of the children, the deepening of her love for her husband. James decided to keep the ranch in the family, passing it on to his oldest son when the time came. It would remain the Dawson Ranch, a testament to what his parents had built together. Years passed, and then decades. The story of Theresa and Killian became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The girl locked out in the storm, the cowboy who opened his door, the love that grew from an act of kindness and became something eternal. The ranch still stands today, though it has changed and grown over the years. The original house is preserved as a kind of shrine, kept exactly as it was when Theresa died. Visitors can see the books on the shelves, the guitar hanging on the wall, the photographs of Theresa and Killian and their children. They can stand on the porch where the couple spent so many evenings and look out over the land they loved. And up on the hill, under the cottonwood tree that has grown huge with age, two gravestones stand side by side. They are simple markers, nothing fancy, just names and dates and a single line carved into the stone between them. He opened his door and never closed it. It is a love story for the ages, the kind of story that reminds people what is possible when kindness meets courage, when compassion meets determination. It is a story about second chances and new beginnings, about finding home in the most unexpected places. But more than anything, it is a story about love. Real, enduring, transformative love. The kind of love that weathers every storm, overcomes every obstacle, and lasts beyond death itself. Theresa Turner had been locked out on the worst night of her life, desperate and afraid and certain she would die. But Killian Dawson had heard her knock and opened his door, and in doing so, he had saved more than her life. He had given her a future, a family, a love that sustained her through all the years that followed, and she had given him the same. Two lost souls who found each other in the darkness and built a life together in the light. That is what true love does. It opens doors. It creates homes. It transforms lives. And once it takes root, it never, ever dies. The cottonwood tree on the hill still stands, its branches spreading wide over two graves and a century of love. In the spring, it leaves out green and beautiful, and in the fall, its leaves turn gold and scatter like blessings over the ground below. The wind whispers through its branches, carrying stories of the past into the future, making sure that no one ever forgets. The door was opened. The storm was weathered. The love endured, and that is how it should be. That is how it will always be. Forever and always, world without end.